Imagine for a second that you're the captain of a giant ship, and that ship is the entire global economy. For decades, you had this incredible compass, a tool that never failed, always pointing you in the right direction to avoid the storms. But then, all of a sudden, the needle just starts spinning wildly. The compass is broken. Well, that's pretty much the spot the Federal Reserve is in right now.
So we hear about it all the time, right? The economy gets too hot, inflation takes off, and the Fed steps in to raise interest rates. It's their way of tapping the brakes. But here's the billion-dollar question they're all asking themselves. How do you know how hard to press that brake? How do you know when you've gone far enough without sending the whole economy flying through the windshield into a recession?
And this, right here, is the central banker's dilemma. For so long, they had a clear guide, a reliable map that helped them make these huge decisions. But that map, it's dangerously out of date.
To really get why they're in such a bind today, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to look back to a time when things felt, well, a lot more certain. For most of the 20th century, economic policy was driven by a really powerful and, honestly, a pretty simple set of rules.
Okay, so let's crack open this old rule book. It was all built on one foundational idea that, for the longest time, seemed as solid and predictable as gravity itself.
The main idea, the big one, was something called the quantity theory of money, or QTM for short. And the concept is actually pretty straightforward. If you pump more money into the economy, but the amount of stuff to buy doesn't change, then prices have got to go up. It's just more money chasing the same amount of goods. That equals inflation. Simple, direct, and incredibly powerful.
And you know, this theory had a rock star champion, the economist Milton Friedman. He summed up his absolute certainty with this killer quote: "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon." For him, it wasn't a suggestion, it was a law of nature. You want to control inflation? You control the money supply. Period.
And this whole theory, it wasn't just an idea. It was like a clear, mechanical process. It was supposed to work like clockwork. Step 1, the central bank changes the amount of money. Step 2, that move ripples out and changes interest rates and how much banks lend. Step 3, that change in lending affects how much we all spend. And finally, Step 4, that change in spending directly hits inflation. It was a beautiful, elegant machine.
So yeah, it was this beautiful, elegant machine right up until the day it broke down. Because as our economy changed, this once reliable engine just started to fail.
You know, around the mid-1980s, economists started scratching their heads. Something was off. That super neat, predictable connection between the money supply and inflation, it was getting fuzzy. The relationship that was basically the bedrock of their whole strategy was starting to fall apart.
Now, this slide, wow. This really shows you the story in black and white. A paper from the European Central Bank just lays it all out. Between 1945 and 1985, the link between money and inflation was incredibly strong, a correlation of 0.84. That's almost 1-to-1. But then look what happens after 1985. It plunges to negative 0.04. I mean, get this, the link didn't just get weaker, it basically flipped upside down and vanished. Gone.
So, what on earth happened? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm, really. For one, you had all this financial innovation creating new things that acted like money but weren't counted in the old stats. Then, of course, came credit cards and digital payments, which totally changed how we use money. And maybe most important was this idea of velocity shocks. Basically, the speed at which a single dollar gets spent and respent in the economy went completely haywire. The old, simple rules just couldn't keep up.
So with their trusty old map now totally useless, central bankers were basically lost at sea. They needed a new way to navigate. They needed a new North Star.
And that's when they turned from that old, reliable map to something more like a compass, a really tricky one. Instead of looking at how much money was out there, they started chasing this theoretical idea called the neutral rate of interest.
They call it R star, and you can think of it as the just right interest rate. You know, the Goldilocks rate. Not too hot to cause inflation, not too cold to cause a recession. It's that sweet spot where the Fed isn't hitting the gas or the brakes, they're just letting the economy cruise along. That's the target they're supposed to be aiming for.
Okay, so this is the absolute key takeaway. The old map, the quantity theory of money, was based on stuff you could actually look up. You could see the data. It was a bright, clear line. But this new compass, R star, it's a ghost. You can't see it, you can't measure it directly, you can only guess where it is. It's not a bright line, it's what Fed Chair Jerome Powell himself calls a fuzzy blur.
And that brings us right back to today. Central bankers are trying to steer this giant economic ship using a compass that is, at best, a fuzzy blur. And hey, Don't just take my word for it. Listen to the captain of the ship himself, Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He says the Fed is navigating between the shoals of overheating and premature tightening with only a hazy view of what seem to be shifting navigational guides. I mean, that's an incredible admission of just how uncertain things are coming from the person at the helm.
And this slide just perfectly shows you the problem in real time. You've got top Fed officials all looking at the same economy, and they can't agree on where that compass needle is pointing. On one side, you have the low camp, like John Williams, who thinks low rates are here to stay. On the other, you have the high camp, like Tom Barkin, who thinks the neutral rate might be higher. And then the Fed's official best guess, still super low. They're all seeing something different.
So that leaves us with the really big, kind of scary question, doesn't it? These people are making decisions that impact all of our jobs, our savings, our futures. But if their old maps are useless, and their new compass is this fuzzy, unreliable thing, how in the world are they supposed to navigate us through the next crisis?